Hello there folks, and welcome back to another video. In this one we're going to be having a look at another game that has come out recently that has quite caught my eye, and that is Warriors of Athena, which is a brand new game from the minds behind Frostgrave and Stargrave and Silver Bayonet and Rangers of Shadow Deep and a whole bunch of other games like Oathmark as well, which I have looked at the channel before. And Warriors of Athena is a great one because it's a solo and co-op war game that has a little bit of a kind of roleplay feel to it, as you'll see when we look at the quests book. But it is a game that very much sits in the wheelhouse of what McCullough has done in the past, but with a few tweaks and changes here and there to sort of make it feel a bit more unique. As you might have guessed by the artwork and the design, featuring beautiful illustrations by Hazim Amin, as you can see there. Absolutely fantastic stuff. There is a ancient Greek theme to the book and the game as a whole, very much tied into sort of ancient Greek mythology, the gods, Hercules, Jason and the Argonauts, all that kind of stuff. If you've watched films like Clash of the Titans and Jason and the Argonauts, for example, then this is a game that is going to be very much up your street. It allows you to play out all those kind of epic adventures on the tabletop. So, as you'll notice, there are two books for this. Heroes is the book that you'll need for making your characters, and basically walks through the basic game mechanics of Warriors of Athena. And then Quests is the book for the Oracle, or essentially for the players as a group or the individual who wants to get access to all of your quests and your monster manual, so essentially your bestiary in there as well. And essentially gives you everything else you need to play, including a whole bunch of different scenarios and things like that. There's also some stuff in there for people who want to learn how to do that kind of storytelling stuff on the tabletop. So, a little bit role-play, but essentially a cooperative or solo war game that you can have a games master involved with if you enjoy that kind of stuff from older eras of wargaming. So we'll start with the Heroes book, as you can see here. And this is, as I said, a sort of entry point for everybody for the game, and allows you to dive in and get an idea of how to run your games and build your characters. The artwork in it is superb. I absolutely love it, and it's one of the main reasons why I got invested in the game, was simply looking at this. And I'm just going to essentially go through the book and give you an idea of it. So it runs with 28mm stuff, but there's no reason why you couldn't run this game with 10, 15, or even 54mm models if you wanted to go that way. It does make use of D20s for making your rolls, as with a lot of other McCullough games. But it also it requires you to have a set of playing cards, which you can get pretty much everywhere. The core of the book is all about creating a hero and working through the sort of core mechanics of the game. So we'll start with this. All of these are roll tables. So, I mean, you could just pick what you wanted, of course. Because if you wanted to be have Zeus as your parent, then you could easily just say, well, I want one of those. And you could just pick as you like. But I quite like the idea of rolling on it. So what you do first is you roll on table 1. And then this will say which table you then roll on. And you go from there. And when you roll, you'll get a parent. You also get gifts that come from your parent. So, for example, if Zeus was your parent, you might get the heroic abilities Mighty Strength and +1 health. And then in some cases, if you get some really good gifts, you'll then get a certain set of weaknesses. But McCullough has made this so that it's purposely imbalanced. There's no sort of like, this is fair because X or Y. It's been done in such a way that it's all about storytelling, which I think is quite nice. And that sort of flows into the weaknesses, as we were saying there. So sometimes you'll get a gift, but then you'll also get a weakness that goes alongside it, which is kind of awesome. You might even generate something like an enemy that you end up facing all the time. And as I say, this will give you a set of sort of baseline stuff. You'll then have your core stats for the game. So you'll have move, which is how far you move in inches. You'll have fight. You'll see there is a value here. In this case, it's +3. Shoot +1, armor 9, will +3, and health 18. Fight is what you'll use for melee-based combat, be that armed or unarmed, and you'll essentially add the number in there to your d20 roll. Shoot is for ranged combat, which can involve bows, slings, or javelins, and you'll add that to your d20 roll. Armor is how much you soak from an attack that hits you. Will is used for a variety of different things. So it's sometimes used for sort of initiative in a game, but it could also be about willpower, courage, fear tests, that kind of thing. It's a sort of catch-all thing for intelligence in the game. And then health is fairly self-explanatory. That is just your health. You will also get the choice at the very beginning of the game to either go down the shoot or fight route and get +1, but you also get a way to either add to your will or your health by +1. And that'll give you the baseline stats for the game, which are then obviously modified by what you would have got on the hero tables as well for the parentage. You then have your heroic abilities, so there's a range of those to choose from. You will also get a set of 8 skills which you'll assign numbers to, and these skills are essentially used for you to roll against when you're trying to do certain things that are maybe in the campaign or in moments before or after the scenario starts with the miniatures. So you might need to make an athletics check to leap a chasm or something like that. You might have to do a navigation check to find your way to a different location, and that might then change how you deal with the location when you get there. Same for perception and all the other things as well. We'll get to the hero abilities later on. You also have your recruitment points, and recruitment points are used for you to hire your additional sort of companions that you will have in the game. And you'll also have a set of wealth that you'll be using to equip both yourself, but also your minions well, not minions, let's say companions, your companion in the tougher times. And there's a wide range of ancient Greek style weapons and things for you to choose from on that front as well, which is quite nice. And you can see all of them listed there. There's a really fun thing that I quite like in this as well. So you'll have damage modifiers for some of the weapons. You'll have ranges and all that kind of thing as well. I also like that some of the weapons have a break number. So if you roll this number during a fight in ancient Greece and that sort of period, it was sort of assumed that the weapon might break at some point. And so you have this, and if you roll it during a test, it will actually just break the weapon. You'll have to go unarmed, or maybe you'll have to use a secondary weapon or something like that. So, for example, rolling a one with a hand weapon will break your weapon, and you'll be stuck with your fists. I like that bows and slings, they don't break, which is good. There's also some notes on how to use them as well there. You'll have a fate pool, which can be used for other things as well, and you'll decide on your name. More gorgeous art week from Amin, which is quite cool. Your heroic abilities. These are great. These will allow you to do certain fun things like burning eyes. Shoot someone with burning eyes, which is cool. And then you'll see a strain value listed on there. The strain value is sort of what you'll need to what you'll take in terms of your health in order to use these abilities, which is quite nice. And what you'll do when you choose a heroic ability, if we go back to this bit here, a little bit of flipping back and forth to do. You'll have to give a number to your different abilities. So one of them will have 7 and the others will have 9. And the utilization number is what you'll be using in order to use this ability on the tabletop. So you might have to roll a 7 or higher in order to use your Dead Eye or your Death Strike or your Deflect Missile. And that can be changed over the course of a campaign, which is quite nice. And there's loads and loads of different abilities for you to choose from in there, depending on which way you want to take your characters. You also then have your companions. So if you're playing the game solo, you have a recruitment cost of 160, and you can have up to 7 companions. What's really nice about this game as well is that it scales based on the number of players. So if you have 2 players taking part in this, you only have a base recruitment points of 40, and you can only have a maximum of companions of 3, which is quite cool. But it also means that when you're looking at adding miniatures into the game, if you're playing with 2 people, so you're working together to go through here, Warriors of Athena, you're not going to need to buy that many miniatures to make your party, essentially. So, for example, with me, I made my character, which is this guy here, using a myth-forged dude. Really like this sculpt, so it was a 3D print that I got off Etsy. I'll have some links down below if you like the look of him and you want to add him to your collection. So he is my hero. And then, because I only had 40 points to spend, I was like, so how am I going to take this? I could go with like an archer and an axeman, a barbarian, or maybe like an animal companion, so I could have a hound. And I was like, how about if I just spent 35 and got myself a hoplite? So I did that, and I made myself a hoplite companion, because I'm going to be playing this co-op with a friend. And so my hoplite companion just essentially joins me alongside my hero, and I've made up a little story that maybe they are brothers or something like that, or he's the father and this is the son, and they go off adventuring together. And this will then be paired with my friend, who's also using a hero and companions, and we go off and do adventures together, which is pretty cool. So yeah, and they're my two guys that I've painted, and I think they look really cool. They're awesome. I think they're Mythforged I got them from, but I can't remember the exact creator. Very nice indeed. They also do Cyclopses and all sorts of different things. Very nice. So yes, that's essentially all you'd need to start playing as a player of this game. And there's loads of different choices in here, because you can have animal companions and all sorts of different things too, which is quite cool. The actual basis of the game then, as well, once you get into it, is fairly simple. It's a D20 based. So when you take a turn, it sort of falls down into sort of four main phases. So you have the hero phase, the creature phase, the companion phase, and the event phase. In the hero phase, you'll activate one of your heroes, and then you'll be able to see the number of other companions they can activate alongside them. So, for example, with my two guys, them two players, I can do one activation with a companion, so he can activate alongside him. Bish, bash, bosh. If you were playing with if you were playing by yourself and you had even more companions, then you would be able to activate your hero and any of the companions during that sort of portion of the game phase, but then later on you'd activate all the rest of your companions in the third phase, essentially. So your hero gets to do all the important stuff, and then you can remove the rest of your companions later on, which is quite cool. In between all that, you also have the monster phase, but we'll get to that in a second. You've got lots of simple and easy rules for moving around. I'm not going to sort of gild the lily on that one. One of the most important things you're going to be looking at is sort of skill tests and attacking each other in combat. So a skill test will have a TN, which is a target number. So say, for example, the strength roll is 16, as you can see here. You would roll your D20, you would add your strength skill dice to it, which we were talking about earlier, is one of the skills that you can add underneath your stats. And then if you beat that, you pass. If you don't, you fail. Nice and simple. And everything will be based on either a skill or a statistic. And then when it comes to combat, it's actually really simple again. Both you and the opposing figure will roll a d20. You will then add your fight bonuses, and this will dictate what your combat score is. The person who has the higher combat score then wins. The difference between them is how much damage is then done to the opponent, which is quite cool. And then you subtract your armor from the total, add in any damage modifiers, and there you go. That's how much damage you do to your opponent. You could take them out of action, which is quite cool. There are also different ways for you to do things with multiple combats and all that kind of thing as well. And that's all dictated here. If you're working together against somebody, you'll get a bonus to your roll and all that kind of thing as well. But otherwise, you'll sort of like pair things off quite nicely, which I think is quite nice. Reminds me a lot of Middle-earth strategy battle game. You also have critical hits. So if you roll a 20, bosh, you automatically win the combat, and you'll do the damage as it sees fit, which is quite nice. So that's cool. As I said, there's a thing about breaking weapons. You also have shooting. That's done in a similar way. You'll roll your d20 and add your shoot value to it, whilst the opponent rolls their fight value, I believe it is. And then you'll compare the two, and that's the damage that's done. So you can sort of knock arrows at the air, which is quite cool. And then there are a few different things that you can sort of go into. So there's diseases, poisons, and all that kind of thing, which will come up as you go through. You then have your heroic abilities. So heroic abilities are, as you can see here, there's loads of them that we were looking through before. They'll give you extra bonus things you can do during your turn. You'll have the strain, which I said, which is the amount of health that you spend in order to use the ability. But then you can also use exertion. So similar to games like Frostgrave, you can spend extra health in order to force a roll to go through. So if you failed by 2, then you could spend 2 of your health points to make the power activate. This obviously comes off in addition to the strain that you would have suffered anyway. So that's a really interesting thing for you to play around with, which is quite cool. And obviously as you go through and you level up your characters, your strain limit will come down, which I think is quite nice. What else is that? So the creatures have a basic priority chart, as you can see here. If it's in combat, they'll fight. If not, go to step 2. They'll either then shoot if they can, or move to step 3, and then there'll be target points and things that creatures might move to. All of this is then dictated by the scenarios that you'll be playing anyway. We'll talk about playing with an oracle later on, I think, and we'll dive into that. But that's essentially giving you everything you need for sort of how to play the basics of the game. Obviously, there's a little bit more detail in there if you wanted to dive into it yourself. But then you also have the campaign thing. So much like any of the other games from Joe, this also has a campaign feature to it. And this sort of goes through pretty much everything that he does. And in this, you'll do things like you'll check for injury and death, and there is a table for doing that. There's also different ways for you to take permanent injuries, which will affect your stats. Stats can then be sort of modified and changed as you go through. So you might suffer a hurt leg, but it might get better over the course of time, in which case you'll go back to the normal stat that you would have, rather than it just being a +2, it might go back to a +3 and all that kind of thing. You also have remembrance. What happens if your character dies? You find out how they are remembered, which is quite fun. And then as you go through, you'll get different experience levels as you get, and that will give you additional skills, the ability to improve your heroic abilities, improving your stats based on what level you're at. As you go through, you can see what you get there as well. You'll get treasure as you go through from completing different adventures, and this can be common items through to strange and weird things like nectar, liquid courage, Greek fire, and all that kind of stuff. There's also the ability to get your hands on talismans of the gods, and they are sort of acquired by using the prayer, or sort of like, I think it's called prayers. We'll go through to it over here. Sacrifices and offerings. So these are where you can make sacrifices and offerings and spend wealth, and that could get you access to some of the cool stuff like talismans of the gods, which is quite cool. So it's sort of beseeching your father or your mother, and sort of making sure that they sort of see you as a worthy hero of one of their talismans, which I think is quite nice. So that's sort of like the basics of how all of that works. And that gives you everything that you need out of the Heroes book. It's a very simple, quick and easy game to dive into, I think. It has all the hallmarks of a classic McCullough game. And I think it's going to really shine if you start to play this as a co-op experience with multiple players. I'd love to see someone diving in and doing this with maybe 3 or 4 people. Because that also sort of spreads the load, shares the load when it comes to the miniatures that you're going to need for the other side of things as well. So yeah, that's essentially the Warriors of Athena Heroes book that we've just gone through. Now we're going to have a quick swish, and we're going to dive in and we're going to look at the Quests book. So back in a second. As well as the Heroes book we've just looked at, we also have Warriors of Athena's Quests. Now, you are going to need both of these books if you're going to be playing the game. And the way that the quest books works, and I can see why they've split it up now, is that this basically has everything you need for playing out a series of different scenarios. So we're just going to use the first quest, I think, as a primer for this, because I don't want to spoil the rest of the book and sort of go through the other ones. So you essentially got a breakdown of how a quest works, and then you have the first quest, which is the Golden Hives. So if we go through and have a look at this, you also have your best tree in here, which contains all of the monsters you're going to need, as well as rules for making your own quests, which is quite cool. So, how to play a quest. So there are a couple of different ways to do it. You can dive in and you can have an oracle on your side, or you can do this individually just by playing solo or co-op, however you see fit. If you have a oracle, there are certain elements of a quest which essentially are veiled behind the game. And you will read off things like text like this, and then you can often give your players the chance to respond in character as their heroes if you think that makes sense. So for example here, you're beseeched by Athena to do a quest. You then have the opportunity to give the players the ability to come back to you and feedback on sort of what they think about things. That might then inform how you run the quest later on down the line. However, if you are just playing this as a solo or co-op game without the need for a oracle, you'll just essentially read this off and read all of the italic text and then dive straight into the game itself. You'll make some decisions, as you might have imagined, and this might affect things, but there'll be less of an obfuscation of that as you dive in. Each of the quests will also tell you what miniatures you need, so similar to a lot of other McCullough games, I quite like the idea that when you dive into playing a Grave game or Warriors of Athena, it's essentially a way for you to build a collection as you go through. A little bit like a dungeon master building up a collection of monsters to use in a game. So for this one, you're going to need a boar, 3 cyclopses, 1 harpy, 8 plus mythic bees, 2 satyr fighters and 2 serpents. It has been explained by Joseph that if you are doing this and you don't have mythic bees, use something that is an equivalent of Mythic Bees, if you know what I mean, as long as it makes sense to you. Then what you'll do is you'll set up all of the maps, and they'll be based similar to this, so you can see if you can find something that fits like this. So maybe go and steal some flowers from around the house, or maybe build some of your own, use some plastic stuff that you might have found in the garden centre, and you'll set it up and you'll play through. And as you play through, as with a lot of other McCullough games, as I mentioned, there'll be things like clue markers on the board, and when you see clue markers, you can go and interact with those. There's also this event card thing, which happens during the event phase, which we're talking about in the Heroes book. And basically, you'll flip over a card and you'll see what happens. So it might add 2 Mythic Bees to a table corner. It might place a boar. It might add a warrior. It might play around with different things, like doing things with the flowers. It would play a beautiful song and all that kind of thing. So it essentially builds up the tension over the course of a game. You'll also have challenge levels that you can sort of change in different ways if you're the Oracle or you're just finding the quest particularly easy. There's also the rewards that you get in the end, which is what you'll use in terms of experience. And then, once you've done one quest, you will flip through and you will do the next one. And in this case, there'll be an epilogue to read, and then you'll move on to scenario 3, which is the Brothers 3, which includes a bunch of Cyclopses. You'll see a similar map. You'll see a breakdown of what to do with the clue markers and the events, the special rules that come into play, which you can keep secret if you're the Oracle, and you can surprise your players with them like a good GM. Or, of course, if you're playing this as a group, then you'll obviously see all of these, and you'll read through it as you see fit. And then you'll have challenge levels, rewards, the epilogue, and then you'll finish off that. And then there are a couple of other quests included as part of this one. So you have those particular scenes in that one to play through. Nice and simple. Bish bash bosh. And as you go through, each of the quests are slightly more complicated in detail. Add more monsters into the mix. Build things up and give you different ways to play out your games, which is quite cool. Once you've done all of those, of course, there is the chance that you will find new quests in more books from Joe that'll be available through separate supplements and that kind of thing. Or, of course, you can dive in and create your own quests with the Oracle, and you can build up your own scenarios using the collection of miniatures that you've developed over the course of playing through the first 3 in this book, which is quite cool. The other reason that you're going to need the quests book is because this also comes with the bestiary. So here is the bestiary here. This contains all of the rules for all of the monsters that you're going to be using. So bears, bees, crabs, deer, serpents, skeletal figures, walking corpses, revenant warriors, satyrs, giants, cyclopses, amazons, all that kind of thing. Monsters like the harpies, the gorgon, the witch, and the sphinx. Essentially everything you think you need over the course of those adventures is included here in the book, so you are going to need it. A lot of the creatures also then come with their traits, which you can find here as well, so it's all in one book. Now, some people might balk at the idea of this being across 2 separate books, but I think this makes sense. If this had all been included as part of Warriors of Athena Heroes, you were going to be looking at paying the same price for it anyway, I think, based on just how thick the book was going to be. But including it as part of the quest thing keeps it kind of simple. It also means that it kind of works like a DMG plus a monster manual for Dungeons and Dragons, but in obviously a tabletop role-playing war game style as you see fit. It also means that when you're playing the game, the heroes just need to keep an eye on this, and then the Oracle just uses this. So it's kind of separated out. And yes, I can understand why people would be sort of balking at that, I suppose. But I think it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, considering how cheap it is to buy the game and play the models anyway. I mean, these guys were 20 quid for both of them, and I've got them ready to go on. No, even less than that. 15, 16 quid, and I've got them ready to go. That's my heroes all sorted. I just need to then go out and either use stuff from my collection already, or maybe just, pick up a couple of models here and there and go through the scenarios as you see fit. So that's essentially a breakdown of what you do with the quests book and how it works. It's very simple in the grand scheme of things, and it's just a nice addition to what you've already got there in the Heroes set. Both of these books are around, I think it's around £20 each, something like that. So you're looking at about 40 for both of these together. But it's a really interesting concept and a really interesting direction, I think, for Joseph to have taken. Exploring Greek myth and legend. But I think it's really cool, really fun game. I'm quite excited about it, and I hope that I actually get to play it with a friend of mine and we dive in and have some fun with it. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Do you like the idea of Warriors of Athena? Do you like the idea of them being split over 2 books? How would you have done it otherwise? Well, let me know down below. What models are you thinking to be using for this game? Have you got something in mind? Make them to like, share, subscribe, do all that good stuff. There are also links down in the comments and things like that for affiliate links to Wargames Atlantic, where you can buy some really cool ancient Greek stuff, as well as Firestorm Games if you want to go over there to get some models from those folks. And there's also a Ko-fi link down there too. I even do memberships on the channel because I do behind the scenes videos and all sorts of different things. I'm even planning to do live streams very soon if I can get some time. After my wedding, I'll be doing that, diving into that. But yeah, please let me know what you think of Warriors of Athena and if this video was any help. And I will be back with even more videos very, very soon. So yes, thank you very much, folks. Dive in, let me know what you think, and I'll be back with even more later in the week. So, bye for now.